On January 5th, 2026, a video appeared on the Shiny WR channel, allegedly located in North Korea. This video lasted about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours and 30 seconds. That's just about 140 years. And the content? Nothing. No audio, no video, just void. The channel also features a few other bizarre uploads. For example, a previously published 294-hour-long video, way above YouTube's default 12-hour limit for regular uploads. Or a 150-hour shorts video. Yes, shorts, which is of course significantly longer than the 3-minute limit for YouTube shorts. So the channel almost instantly became the center of internet curiosity, but unfortunately it raised more questions than answers, much to the original creator's disappointment, who later revealed, paraphrasing, that he was shocked his content went viral and had hoped his secret project would remain a niche little secret. But that's impossible, right? The whole illusion falls apart the moment you actually click on one of these videos. Suddenly, those 140 years turn into just a bit over 12 hours, which is still 34 minutes and 56 seconds over YouTube's 12-hour limit. 12 hours or 256 gigabytes, whichever comes first. And of course, it's hard not to notice that in both cases, these videos are basically just a counter counting from 1 to 7 on the thumbnail or from 1 to 6 in the actual video. The time divisions, however, are in completely different places. You've probably already guessed the boring explanation. This has to be some kind of YouTube glitch, some weird player bug triggered by a weirdly encoded, deliberately broken file that makes everything freak out in exactly this way. In the channel description, there's also a link to the web archive where we can see a playlist containing 5,000 videos, each 1,700,000,000 hours long. Videos that are routinely removed by YouTube, which is why this archived playlist exists. And together, they create a combined experience lasting 8,901,000,000,000 hours. That is roughly 1 billion years. So yes, at first glance, it's yet another quirky internet oddity that you've probably already seen in a headline weeks ago. But this topic is far more interesting than just a 140-year-long video YouTube bug, because I remember the good old days when YouTube had no real limits. I mean, it did have some limits. First it was like 10 or 11 minutes, then it was the legendary 15 minutes limit, which you could later of course extend by adding your phone number to YouTube account. And then what was the limit exactly? As long as your file fit within the maximum gigabytes and it was encoded in a correct format, I guess you could upload footage that lasted years. Sky was the limit. I actually found an article from 2006 that said the slightly over 10-minute limit existed because most longer uploads on the platform at the time were copyrighted content. In other words, pirated movies and TV shows. But then they introduced this clever little machine algorithm called Content ID, which since 2007 has obsessively scanned every uploaded video for music, footage, or basically any content that doesn't belong to the uploader. And because of that, the time limit, at least for this specific reason, was no longer necessary. So YouTube announced that gradually for selected accounts, the 10-minute limit would be lifted. And I remember how for a few years, YouTube basically existed without any arbitrary length limits, which meant that videos started appearing that were more for flexing than for any real purpose. Just absurdly long videos. There used to be several longest videos on YouTube, but good luck finding them today. I remember this one iconic over 500-hour YouTube video that was just about over 20 days of watching experience. On July 17th, 2011, a user called Moldy Toaster Media uploaded a video that lasted 571 hours. And breaking that record didn't take long, because just a few months later, on October 15th, 2011, the same exact user uploaded a 596-hour-long video. And then on December 14th, 2011, yet another one, 596.5 hours. Finding the originals today is basically impossible. Everything either got deleted or buried under YouTube's modern nightmare search algorithm that shows me literally every piece of garbage on earth, except except these specific videos from 2011. All the links I found on sketchy Reddit threads about the longest YouTube videos were completely dead. They led either to video unavailable, account terminated, or video removed for violating YouTube's policies. Honestly, I only know this much about these videos thanks to this guy, Timeworks, who made a video about them 4 years ago and basically preserved them for us. He even dug into the nerd stats of one of those uploads and found out that the resolution of the longest video was mere 16 by 16 pixels, which is not a lot. And it pretty much explains how such a ridiculously long video was even possible to upload back then. For comparison, today's 140-year-long YouTube video has a resolution of 0 by 0 pixels. And that's interesting actually. Along the way, there were also various timers and other gimmicks, videos that were supposed to last forever. Usually it was like 100 or 200 hours, that sort of thing. But one thing is clear, YouTube does not like these kind of videos and these kinds of shenanigans. So even though some of them have millions of views, they're probably being quietly deleted piece by piece, and new length limits keep getting introduced. But whatever was uploaded before those limits were introduced, as you can see, can sometimes survive, unless it's those 500-hour plus videos. Then for some weird reason, YouTube really had to erase them and wipe every trace of their existence. Literally 1984. In general, YouTube is a very specific platform, because it's one of the last remaining places online where fairly large and extremely bandwidth-heavy content can still be uploaded basically for free. You could even earn money off of it. And the limits here are relatively generous. And that business model is insanely hard to sustain. It's insanely hard to push to profitability, especially if you factor in the revenue sharing program with the creators here. And I go into deeper details about all of this in my video regarding why YouTube is a monopoly and why it's gonna stay that way for a while. And even if YouTube does die someday, no replacement will be coming back for quite a while. And that's exactly why all of those length and gigabyte limits are here in the first place. And why breaking those rules is kinda enforced strictly. Because if it weren't enforced harder, you'd probably hear more stories like this, where some guy treated YouTube as an additional hard drive. And I'm not even talking about storing your private video files on YouTube. That's the obvious use case, and it's still pretty risky at scale for reasons I'll explain in a second. I'm talking about storing raw data, zeros and ones encoded into special graphical formats. In theory, you could store unlimited gigabytes of literally anything for free. Then whenever you felt like it, you could download the video, decode it, and as long as compression didn't completely destroy those weird patterns, you could just read the data and use it. Obviously, this is painfully inefficient, slow, and straight up against YouTube's terms of service. If YouTube noticed you uploading thousands of private videos full of blinking pixels, they would, if they legally could, probably kill you. But realistically, they'd just delete your account and all your data would go poof. Just like those bastards deleted the longest video on their platform. Still, people did experiment with this, and some probably actually used it on a small local scale. For example, this guy built an encoder and decoder that converts files into zeros and ones displayed visually in Full HD. Each bit had to be at least 4 pixels in size, so that after compression, you could still read anything at all. Every file encoded like this into a YouTube free cloud drive format became about 20 times larger. But in theory, you could upload it to YouTube forever and just forget about it. Until Google finally knocks on your door and bang bang, you're dead. But this whole concept gave me a pretty interesting idea. What's the longest a video can actually be? On YouTube, the limits are known. It's 12 hours. On traditional film stock, actual movie film, you could argue the limits are known too, right? Film is physical. It takes up space. So let's try something insane. Let's replace the entire mass of our observable universe with our longest movie. Assume it's 35mm film, running at 24 frames per second. If you take the average thickness of that film stock and its density, you find that 1 second of footage weighs about 2.9 grams. So how much does the observable universe weigh if you want to fill it with all those seconds? Roughly this much. 10 to the power of 53 kilograms. A number with 53 zeros. At least if we only count so-called baryonic matter, the normal matter we actually know, without adding all the weird stuff and hypotheses about dark matter and other little fun things. So yes, we're already simplifying a simplification, but let's keep going. So how long would a film really be if it filled that entire mass? Give or take something like 10 to the power of 48 years of film. And even though that sounds almost harmless, like the absurd part is that we can even name the number, this is quite a lot. Like a lot. It's hard to comprehend, to even process how much it really is. We're talking a million years, to a degree where the estimated age of the universe, 10 to the power of 10 years, starts looking like a quick bathroom break. But that's still only filling the matter that actually exists. In space, the universe is mostly empty. Turning all of its observable matter into film wouldn't fill it in any meaningful way, just like planets and stars don't fill it today, because they're separated by distances that, for a reason, are literally called astronomical. Just to be clear, I wasn't particularly good with physics and math at school, but these calculations are pretty simple if you put the right numbers. So what if we try to fill the entire volume of the universe with film, like every single inch between galaxies? Here's where the real problem shows up. For there to be film in every cubic meter of space, we'd have to raise the universe's average matter density. This wouldn't be some roll of film casually floating around. This would be one gigantic solid slab, a single dense block of matter the size of the freaking observable universe. And at that density, matter stops behaving nicely. Newton is beatboxing in his grave just imagining what happens to gravity under conditions this absurd. Space starts collapsing in on itself. Physics goes nope, like when you spawn too many items in one spot in Garry's mod and the game just gives up. But okay, how long would that video be? Fine, this film doesn't have to fill every last gap. Let it float and roam around however it wants. It just needs to fill as much space as possible. Let's say that 1 cubic meter of film equals to about 500,000 seconds of footage. The estimated volume of the observable universe is 3.6 times 10 to the power of 80 cubic meters. So our universe clogging film movie would last about 5.7 times 10 to the power of 78 years. And recently some of you told me I should stop swearing because you want to send this video to your aunt or something, but how on earth am I not supposed to swear? This is absolutely up. Thank you. I just hope I picked reasonable assumptions and picked the right numbers that are at least in the right neighborhood. If I did, that's great. If I did not, I genuinely don't know if I'm gonna read comments under this video. But film stock needs all that physical space. It needs raw materials. And then you'd actually have to record that movie. And oh god, how long would that take? With film, you're automatically dealing with a massive pile of limitations when it comes to breaking these kind of records. So where can we just throw all those limitations out of the window? Computers. Digital. You see, film stock contains light-sensitive material, where every frame is basically a chemically exposed and developed snapshot, frozen in contrast and color, forming what we perceive as an image. Each frame is a separate recorded picture. But that's not really how movies are made today. This video you're watching right now looks like it's made of frames. We still talk about frames per second, and sure, if you pause it, you can step through it frame by frame, really slowly. But that's a lie. Modern videos, especially the ones uploaded to the internet, are basically just insanely complex compression algorithms. They don't store individual pictures. Instead, they store instructions. Move this there. Don't change this part at all. This part actually changes a lot, so update it frequently, because that's this guy's mouth moving. That's how frames get generated. But the video itself isn't literally made out of frames anymore. What really matters is what moves where, how exactly and how often things need to be refreshed, updated when the scene changes drastically. All of this because of a simple reason I tried to explain a couple minutes ago. Individual frames just take up a lot of space. Even digitally storing each single frame separately is in most cases inconvenient, to say the least. And most importantly, for most cases, it's completely unnecessary. That's basically how only high-end cinema camera work, recording in raw formats. And those formats are the subject of an eternal conspiracy and patent war, especially fueled by one big company whose name eerily resembles a word for the color red, which absolutely refuses to let competitors use raw video formats. So even the most expensive Sony cameras still record video in compressed formats. But back to the point. Information about pixel movement and entire segments of video that don't need to be refreshed because nothing changes take up far less disk space. They also require less data transfer when you're casually streaming YouTube videos in the evening. That means fewer resources, less money, and everyone's happy because less energy is needed to get a similar result. result. And that's exactly why snow and heavy noise in online video looks so terrible, because that's a ton of changes happening at once, and the compression algorithm just can't keep up with calculating and shifting all that information. You can of course increase what's called the bitrate, the actual flow of information, so you get more changes, more detail, more motion data, but that increases file size. It increases the amount of data that has to be pulled from servers hundreds of miles away onto your computer. So most streaming platforms have a predefined maximum bitrate, non-negotiable and optimal, as a compromise between video quality and how expensive the transfer is. That's why on YouTube Premium, besides regular Full HD, there's also Full HD with a higher bitrate. It's still Full HD, but more data gets downloaded to your computer and you get more quality, more detail, simply because the bitrate is higher. So when you have an absurdly simple video, the file size of this video stops growing proportionally to the length of this footage. An hour-long video with a simple, unchanging black frame can weigh less than a minute of chaotic handheld footage. If nothing changes for an hour, the codec has basically nothing to do. Time passes, but data doesn't increase because nothing changes. And if there's no more data, then the length of this video is just a number in the file header. And that's exactly why videos that last hundreds of years can exist. Not because someone recorded years worth of footage, obviously not. At that point we have a mathematical problem. And if this problem is mathematical, you can just type in big enough number and voila. So if length in digital video is just a number, how big can that number be? As you might remember from my video about time limits in computers that you probably haven't watched, limits do exist, but they can usually be patched or worked around. Let's separate two things here, the codec and the container. A codec describes how the video is encoded, motion instructions, changes, and so on. The most popular codecs are H.264 and H.265. A container is where those instructions are stored, the file format itself, like MP4 or .mov. And this is where things get interesting. Codecs count their frames, timestamps, and decoding order using integers of finite size. Frame numbers and timestamps are stored in a limited number of bits. Once you exceed those ranges, the counter overflows, the player freaks out, and time stops making sense. But you'll probably hit container limits even sooner, especially in a video where nothing ever changes. Containers have their own time fields and numeric values, and they are definitely not infinite. Most of them are 32-bit, sometimes 64-bit depending on implementation.
4 bits, 2 bits, 1 bit, half bit!
Bits determine how many numbers a counter can store, and in every case there's a limit. Sometimes it's just a ridiculously huge one. In the case of 32-bit timestamps, the classic ones from old systems, the counter ends pretty quickly. This is that famous moment when the clock rolls over, and suddenly it's 1970, 1901, or something equally hilarious. The limit is small enough that we actually had to care about it, and people did care. A 32-bit counter can store just about over 4 billion time units. So if we count by seconds, that's about 136 years. Then 64-bit came along, famously used in Unix, and the scale just completely breaks here. With 64 bits, the counter doesn't end in our lifetime, not in humanity's lifetime, not even in Earth's lifetime. We're talking about 292 billion years, which is in practice further into the future than anyone will ever care about. So in the end, all of this means that at some point, sooner or later, a given counter will just reach the end. And even though in some cases it would take billions of years, eventually it will happen, period. But does that mean that the universe-sized film reel beats the digital infinite? Well, of course not. I know that in my video about time limits in computers, I framed it like the world is going to end when some clock rolls over, and sure, maybe the world will end if some critical system clock overflows and nobody updates it in time. In time, you get that? But here's the thing, these limits are flexible. You could absolutely design a container with counters large enough for a video lasting 100 times the age of the universe, and nothing would overflow. In theory, that should be possible. Digital limits aren't final laws of nature. They're conventions. They're not physics. They're just simple decisions made by engineers decades ago, back when I didn't even exist. And that's why purely theoretically, nothing stops us from creating a video file whose duration is measured in hundreds of billions of years. As long as someone agrees agrees to increase the numeric range describing that time. And it's even entirely possible that this footage that will last more than the age of our universe should fit onto this small micro SD card. And that's why 140-year-long video or more is possible. No one will ever, of course, record such a video, but creating one, that part is surprisingly easy. Take care out there on the internet. Thank you for watching.